I have been recording my video for almost 4 hours, and I'm not going to use any of that, which is particularly ironic because the video is about how being a perfectionist, pretty much stops me from finishing anything. Hey there, hey there, hey there, hey there, hey there. Nope. Hey there, LCW here. For real this time, I swear. Thanks for joining me. Now, let's talk about why it took me nearly 6 years to finally finish making my first YouTube video. Now, the reasons it took me more than 5.5 years to finally finish and upload a video to this channel that I've had since June 2013 are essentially the same as the reasons it took me almost a full month to complete making that first video, the only other video on this channel right now. And those are basically the same reasons that this video has taken me about 2 weeks to make as well. And we're going to get to all of it. I'm going to apologize in advance though. Part of the reason why this is taking me so long to make is that I just have so damn much to say. So I'm sorry if it's cut up to bejesus and is still extremely long anyway, but I really need to get all of this out. And I do hope that some of you who recognize yourself in some of what I'm about to share with you here will learn to stop it, because I definitely need to make some changes. But before I get ahead of myself and have to start this over for the 10th time, let's just take it step by step, and we're going to start at the premise. You may already be aware that my first video was partly a critique of Chris Boutte at The Rewired Soul and a video he put up earlier this year titled The YouTuber Burnout Myth. And I was strongly motivated to share my legitimate criticisms with you, but that wasn't really what motivated me to finally do this thing that I've wanted to do since, more than half a decade now. And the thing that actually stirred me so deeply that I finally made a video, actually finished a video, was when I heard Chris say this.
I know other YouTubers have higher production value than I do, but you guys, if you put in 40 hours a week, it's really hard for me to fathom a YouTuber not putting out one video a week.
As soon as I heard him say those words, I wanted to test that hypothesis. Is it really true that any kind of YouTuber, even a complete novice like myself, could put out a video every week if they just put in the hours? And I think the obvious answer is yes for some people and no for others, because there are different kinds of content, there are different kinds of creators, and all of that is just so variable. And so, like any good scientist, I know if I want to really trust my observations from testing this hypothesis, I need to eliminate as many variables as possible. So I thought the best way to do that would be to try to make a video that was very simple. And Chris Boutte's format is pretty simple. So I was going to try to mimic his format as closely as possible and see how long it took me to make the same kind of video. So Chris's formula usually goes like this. You sit in front of a camera, you talk for 10 to maybe 20 minutes about some kind of mental health issue, and then relate all of that to something going on YouTube and use another creator's content to help make your point. That's essentially all I had to do, and I already knew what I wanted to say pretty soon after I watched the YouTuber Burnout Myth, so it should have been a very simple test. But I'm a very complicated test subject. From the beginning, I knew that I should not expect to be able to finish making a video in a couple of hours the way that Chris can, but I thought it would be a reasonable prediction that I could finish making that video in a few days, and it would be really great if I could get it done by January 7th, because I decided this would be a kind of New Year's resolution kind of thing. If I wanted to make a video for every week of the year, it would be a good idea to try to get one on my channel by the 7th. And so I'm just going to go ahead and point out, this is one of my problems. At the very start of this project, I had already cut my deadline in half, and there was almost zero distance between whatever synapse in my brain said, I don't know if a week is long enough for a complete novice to make a video, and the other one that said, not only will I do this in 3 days, I'll do it 52 more times this year. So the day that I watched Chris's video was January 4th, the day it came out, in the evening, maybe about 6 o'clock, and I spent most of the rest of that night working myself up to actually doing this project. But I spent most of the next day just doing research and trying to come up with an outline. I transcribed Chris's video, which might not have been necessary, but it was helpful in making that little table and that little pie chart, which I'm still very proud of. So even though that took a few hours, and Chris Boutte could have made probably 3 videos in the time that it took me to do my research and my outline and transcribe his video, it was worth it to me. And I started really planning out what I was going to do to actually put the video together. So not just what I was going to say, but also, you know, when I was going to use certain clips, so that I could plan accordingly. And that probably sounds reasonable, but I need you to see how much work I put into this script, because it was probably more than necessary. Probably is being nice. It was more than necessary, and it took a really long time. And this is always how I've done writing-based projects. I'll follow one of 2 equally inefficient approaches. The first is to just dump everything out of my brain onto a page and just get it all out, say everything I could possibly think to say about it. Sometimes just say the same thing 5 different ways and see which one comes out best, and then pare it all down to just the most relevant, brilliant bits. Or I will painstakingly edit as I write, trying to get each line perfect before I will proceed to the next. And my writing teachers throughout my entire life have been trying to explain to me, you just need to get it out and keep it as simple as possible, and then once you are done, add to it. And that's just something I never took seriously, and I'm pretty sure that is also what contributed to my extreme burnout in my real life job, which does involve a lot of writing on a regular basis. And it was also at this point that I realized I haven't just written for the sake of writing creatively in years. That was something that I used to love doing, and I made it so torturous for myself to do that I eventually stopped doing it altogether. And this whole project was just a nice opportunity for me to realize how deeply I want to change these bad habits that I have and replace them with good, healthy habits that will enable me to actually do the things that I enjoy doing when I want to be creative, because I really miss doing that. So, since I was still working on the script well into the 7th, I realized pretty quickly I was not going to get my video done and uploaded in that amount of time, but I also realized that I didn't need to, because the goal was not to finish a video in 3 days, it was to do it in a week, or really just to see how long it would take me, a novice, to do it at all. But that realization didn't really bring me any comfort. I just ended up putting more pressure on myself. I'm very lucky to live with my best friend, who is also my fiance. We're going to call him Bun. And it's easier for him to notice when I am getting anxious or putting a lot of pressure on myself or getting really stressed out, because for one thing, I have some physical symptoms that make it obvious, but also me being in the midst of my anxiety makes it really difficult for me to be objective about how I'm behaving or how I'm handling my stress, even with his help. It took a long time for me to just relax. So anyway, Bun helped me realize that I was the one that set that deadline, and no one else even knew I was doing this project, so there was no one to disappoint. And it was kind of a good thing that I don't really have a significant following on social media. No one is expecting anything from me except me, and I really needed to cool it. So I kept hammering out the script, but then I ran into this other problem that I had created for myself. I wasn't making that simple video I described to you anymore. I was making something way more complicated, and unnecessarily so. Like, I wanted to add an intro card. I wanted to have royalty-free music playing, at least during the introduction. I wanted to have those little pop-outs that come up on the screen, and I wanted them to have little tidbits of information about burnout. And I had this one just really ridiculous idea. I wanted to cut out Chris's head that he uses in his little icon, and have that little head like bounce in off the frame when I was making criticisms of him and then sort of wave his little head away out of the frame as a kind of flag to anybody who might be paying attention that I was going to come back to that point later and do some reflection on myself and why I felt that way. And you know, that might sound cute. It also might sound pretty silly to just sort of want to do that for your first video, but it would have been way sillier if I actually had put myself through all the trouble of doing all that. That's my boy. His name is Ajax. Just wanted to introduce you since you decided to be a part of the video. Looking back, I think maybe I put all of that time and energy into coming up with all that I was going to say and what I planned to do in editing and just this big complicated vision for this whole project so that I could put off for as long as possible this part where you have to sit in front of your camera and talk to yourself. I knew I had some self-image issues before all of this that still needed to be resolved, but I did not realize how deeply I dreaded having to look at myself on screen while I was recording or in editing. When I first started using my iPhone to record myself, I refused to use the reverse camera where you can actually see yourself on the screen while you're doing it. So essentially I was just recording blind for the first handful of times that I tried this, and just saying that right now sounds so insane. There was one time I made a lot of really great progress. I thought I'd recorded pretty much everything that I wanted to say, and then I went back and watched it and it was all completely blurry. And I didn't want to sound like a hypocrite because at one point in my video I talked about how Chris's videos were blurry and, you know, hey Chris, just record it again, no big deal, right? I was also kind of obsessed with the idea of recording in a completely silent space. And I didn't want to have to, you know, in editing, remove any ambient sound from my environment. So I actually turned off the HVAC to my house and just sat in the cold with a blanket in my lap trying to get through this recording process. And I didn't want the heater to click on in the middle of me talking and me have to remove that later. Hello. Are you gonna sit on my keyboard? You're gonna, don't you do it. That is not a bed. Are you serious? You're so cute, but you drive me so crazy. You can't, hold on, let me just show you. This is gonna drive me crazy later in editing, but that's what my cat is doing right now. Oh, jeez, he's just adorable. I hate it. Well, yeah, we good? Oh, that's definitely crooked. All right, we're just gonna go with it. We're just gonna go with it, that's right. So, I was also obsessed with this idea of recording in a completely silent space. And so, even though I'd spent days working on this script, I wanted to turn my computers off because they're really loud. So the only logical thing to do, obviously, would be to memorize my entire script. So I would practice my very long monologue, and I would take it segment by segment based on when I knew I was going to use clips from Chris's video, so at least I didn't try to memorize the whole thing in one long go. But that really wasn't much better, because when I sat down to record in front of my camera, I would take one segment at a time, and I would get a couple of minutes into each one and make a mistake, trip up on my words, or my inflection wouldn't be the way that I wanted it to be. I would get through my intro, I would get like a minute and a half into it, and I would have to start over. And I would do that dozens of times. Sometimes I would record for so long that my phone's battery would die or the memory would get full and I'd have to go back through and delete prior attempts to make room for more. It was a problem. I had been recording for, over the course of 10 days, about 30 hours total, which is just a lot. And I'm pretty sure the 2 or 3 takes that I ended up using came from one day and a total of about 3 or 4 hours of recording, which is still a lot for a video that's only supposed to be about 10 to 20 minutes long. But before I even sat down to do any of those attempts, I would have at least an hour, sometimes 2, of prep in advance for that. I would take a shower, I would do my hair, I would put on this outfit that I just had to wear, I would put on a full face of makeup, and there were some days where I got so hung up on making sure the wing of my eyeliner on one eye was perfectly aligned with the wing of eyeliner on my other eye, and I would get so frustrated and burn so much daylight that I would just decide it wasn't even worth recording. And the lighting had to be perfect too. So I have 2 big windows in my house that get excellent light. And this one that I'm sitting in front of right now has an interior shutter. And I'm actually propping my phone up on that skinny little spindly stick that you use to like move the flaps up and down. So that is the extent of my camera setup for anybody who is thinking that they need something really fancy. I have an iPhone and an interior shutter, and that is a simple way to do things. But again, I am a very complicated person, and if it was overcast or rainy, that just wasn't perfect enough, so I would move it to the next day. I would just try again the next day. And the other drawback of recording in front of this window is that it faces a street. There are school buses, about 6 of them apparently, and planes that fly overhead, and dogs that are being walked, and I have cats and a dog, and so anytime there was any kind of interruption noise-wise, it would completely throw me off, and I would start over. And my fiance, who I share this office space with, he works out of the house about 2 or 3 days of the week, and all other times he works from home. So when I would do my recordings, I would wait until he was out of the house, and that would limit my schedule to just a few hours on about 2 or 3 days a week. And all other days of each of those weeks, I would just agonize about this video not being done yet. And when he would go out for work and come back home in the afternoon, instead of being happy to see him and ready to enjoy our time together, I would be crying and upset and feel like a failure for not being able to finish this project that was supposed to be for fun and to, you know, help me improve my mental health. I have a long history with anxiety. One of the most prominent physical responses that I have is called hyperventilation, but it might not be what you're thinking when I say that word. It plays out differently for different people, and for me, it's basically just this shortness of breath and this compulsion to try to take a nice, satisfying, relaxing, deep breath and not really being able to achieve that. It's not the breathing that I'm having trouble with. It's that mentally I'm not achieving the satisfaction that I'm looking for. So lately I have been practicing calming breathing techniques, and with some additional gentle nudging from Bun, I have been coming around to this idea that I've known was good advice for a long time but just stubbornly refused to take, which is taking frequent breaks. That is something I've always struggled with. From childhood through my professional career and definitely through my burnout experience, I get so fixated on something I want done that I will not stop doing it. I will forsake all other responsibilities, and that prevents my brain from functioning at full capacity. I know, I've seen the scientific research, I know that it is better for you to take more frequent breaks. You'll actually get your work done faster. It will be a better product. But I just could not let go. So more than once during that first video, Bun had to convince me to step away and stop working on it for at least a full day, just not even think about it. And he would remind me that no one besides the 2 of us even knew that I was working on this project, so there was no one to disappoint. If it took a year to make this video, that would be okay. But the more time passed, the more pressure I felt. I was sure this just wasn't even going to be relevant anymore. Chris makes like 3 videos a day, so in a week there are already 20 videos in between the one that I'm trying to critique and the one that I want to put up. And it took longer than a week. The deadline moved from the 11th to the 18th and then to the 25th, and I think that was around the time that Premink's video came out. So now Chris was all wound up about this other YouTuber criticizing him, and I still have a lot of opinions about how all of that played out, but bottom line, you know, it's time to make this stupid video already. It's not going to be perfect, but obviously it doesn't have to be. Premink's wasn't. So when I finally sat down to record the video that I actually put up on this channel, it was a sunny afternoon. My fiance had gone over to a friend's house. He brought his computer and monitor and keyboard with him. Did you even notice that that just suddenly appeared in the frame, by the way? Probably not, because it's not a big deal. I left my computer on and running so that I could look at the screen and read the script anytime I forgot the lines, and I didn't remove any ambient sound from my video, and it was fine. There was no royalty-free music, there was no intro card, there were no pop-outs, there was no bouncing Chris Boutte head. It was fine. You can see that it was actually a couple of different takes shot at different times of day because the lighting is different, and I just kind of cobbled it together, and at one point the frame is even tilted, but nobody has brought that up or maybe even noticed it because it's not a big deal. It was fine. And I was so obsessive about just the process of making this video, I didn't even have time to think about what was going to happen when I actually put it up on this channel. I did not have any channel art, and it was kind of a minor freak out right before midnight on February 1st, before it turned into February 2nd. And I remember being really upset with myself that I hadn't gotten it done in time for the 1st, because that was really important to me for some reason. It only took like 5 minutes to slap some stuff together, and I don't think anybody even cares what any of that looks like, and they probably wouldn't have cared if it wasn't there at all. But even so, it only took me a few minutes to do it, and it's fine. And I know this is a lot to hear, but part of this process and the reason it's been so hard is not just how much I have to say, but how obvious and how great my level of dysfunction is when I tell you all of this. It's actually a little embarrassing. Like, I'm too grown to be this messy. But I did learn a lot about myself from making that first video and from making this one too. This time around, I caught myself starting to do some of the same bad habits I've just described to you. And I tried to just do things a very different way. I decided not to write a script at first, and it wasn't terrible, but after about 2 or 3 days of trying to record, I ended up with about 4 hours of really good footage. I watched it back and laughed at how pronounced my ADHD was, but it took me 4 hours to watch it all. And as soon as I was done watching, I realized I should have kept some notes of the timestamp of each of the parts I actually planned on using when I cobbled it all together. So I had to watch it all again, but this time I did take my notes. But even with all of that, editing was still really, really hard to do because everything that I had said was just so disorganized and it was coming out all choppy, and I was getting frustrated again, especially every time I heard myself say this: get it all done and then go back and edit. And if you get to that process of editing and you're like, you know what, this is actual garbage and this isn't at all what I meant to say, I'm gonna have to do this over again, that will still take less time to do than if you really did just sit there and try to edit it as you go and get it perfect the very first time. So I took my own advice and I went back and took just a few hours to write out all of my thoughts, and I've got them up on this computer, which is on, ready to remind me of what I wanted to say, and I'm recording this knowing that if I mess something up or if I forget something, I have other footage that I can use to supplement this if I need to, and it's gonna be fine. And this video is being made in roughly half the time that it took me to make that first video, and I know even now it didn't even need to take this long. It's becoming easier for me to convince myself that the stuff that I've been obsessing about just isn't really that big of a deal. But as much as I learned about myself and my potential for improvement from the process of making that video and this one too, I got so much more out of just the positivity and the support and the kindness of all of the people that came and watched that video and left comments. I really cannot possibly articulate to you how much joy and goodness that gave me, and how much it really helped me build some confidence and generally just improve my mental health. Like, yes, it fed my ego, but I think my ego was starving to death. So I really needed that, and I didn't even know until you gave it to me. So thank you, everyone who left those comments. I'm gonna make a separate video to say thank you to all of you, because that's just too important to bury this deep into such a long video about how neurotic I am. So I'm gonna spare you any of that and just go ahead and end this thing. But I really just want you to know how much it means to me and how grateful I am that you're here. And I hope that you are well, and I hope however well you are, it keeps on getting better, because it is for me, and it's an awesome feeling. So thank you for being here, and I hope you can come back and see me again soon.